Alright, welcome back to Mind and Magic. Today we're going to be reviewing a tarot deck, the FABLEMAKER'S Animated Tarot Deck, published by Hitpoint Press. So let's get into it.
Messages span 23 years.
Play from the beginning.
Alright, so first thing, Hitpoint Press is not paying me and I'm not receiving any compensation for this review. I paid for this deck myself after backing them on Kickstarter about 3 years ago. Yes, you heard that right. After waiting 3 years, the deck is finally here. And so we're going to review it. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on whether or not this is worth getting. Now, with tarot decks a dime a dozen, why review this deck? What is it that got old Frater to back it on Kickstarter so long ago? Well, it's because these cards are animated. They are plastic cards whose pictures move when you move the card. Now, this is nothing new. I've seen cards do this before, but I don't believe I've seen a tarot deck do this before. So what I thought I'd do is go through the cards and show off their animations, not spending a whole lot of time on each one because there's a lot of them to get through. And I'm not going to go over the meanings of the cards. For that, you should check out my course, Advanced Tarot. I just want to show off the animations, which is what really makes this deck unique, and then give you my thoughts afterwards, what I think of it as a whole, and if I recommend it or not. So let's check out the Major Arcana. and the Minor Arcana. Advanced Tarot is the definitive course for reading the tarot in divination or using it in your magical practice. Advanced Tarot is a subscription series that runs for 52 weeks. Each week for an entire year, a new lesson on the tarot will be sent directly to your email inbox. Not only are we going to be learning the meanings of each and every tarot card, we're also going to be covering the astrological, Kabbalistic, and even spiritual correspondences of the cards. We're also going to be covering several tarot spreads and a whole lot more. Beginners need not worry about the title. There's plenty in the course to get you up and reading tarot in no time. It's called Advanced Tarot because it goes beyond what most of the books teach you about what the cards mean. You can get Advanced Tarot and other Mind and Magic programs over at mindandmagic.com today. right, so is the FABLEMAKER'S animated tarot deck just a gimmick? Well, yes. Now, there's a lot of great animations in this deck. The standout cards for me has got to be the Chariot, the Wheel of Fortune, the Sun, cards with a decent amount of good animation in them. Because let's face it, that's why you would get this deck. But then there's a lot of cards that are just kind of meh, that didn't have a lot of animation to them. And after waiting nearly 3 years, I really expected more. It's as if some cards just weren't finished. So I think the most disappointing card in the entire deck for me would be the King of Swords. The Page, the Knight, and the Queen all have animated clouds behind them suggesting massive air movement. Those are air cards after all. But then you get to the King, and none of the clouds are moving. Everything's just still and stationary. There's a bird off in the distance that's animated. There's not a whole lot going on. And I couldn't help but think, wow, that's disappointing. The first 3 court cards in the suit were great. But then you get to the King and it kind of sucks. And that's kind of what you're going to run into when you go through this deck. Some cards are going to wow you, and other cards, there's not going to be a whole lot there. And when you purchase an animated deck, you expect an animated deck. So in that regards, it's a gimmick. It's there to attract your purchase. That said, would I recommend the FABLEMAKER'S animated tarot? Unfortunately not. And it really doesn't have much to do with the animations because that's always subjective. There will be those out there who will be fine with having half the deck being lackluster. The real problem with this deck is its size. It's simply not practical to use. So here is my Radiant Weight deck. Here is my Angel deck. Here is the FABLEMAKER'S animated tarot deck. This deck is like 2 decks in one. I have some rather large hands, and there's no way that I could even shuffle this deck without difficulty. And it's because of the plastic material that it's made from. It's much thicker than cardstock. And the real kicker is that they recommend that you sleeve these cards to prevent them from becoming damaged, which would only add to the height of this deck, probably 1.5 times, if not more than what it already is. It's already the size of 2 decks in one. Good luck finding a tarot card case to keep these in. You'd have to get one made custom, or keep it in the little box that it came in, which even they separated it into 2 decks. So that's the biggest problem with this deck. The other issue is that I do believe them when they tell us to sleeve the cards or they'll get damaged. Because mine arrived damaged. They were all scratched up underneath the protective film cover that they put on each individual card. There's only like a dozen cards or so that were undamaged in this deck. The vast majority of cards were all scratched up. Now, I don't know how well that translated when I was filming me showing you the animations. So let me show you some pictures where you can see the scratches on the cards that I received. And again, this was underneath the protective film. As soon as I removed the protective film, I could see the scratches on the cards. I contacted Hitpoint Press about it, and to their credit, they said they would send me another deck. Well, I waited, and when it didn't arrive, I contacted them again just to be sure and was told that they were still going to send it, but not until after all of the other Kickstarters had been shipped out, and mine would go out with the public pre-orders. So there was really no advantage to me backing it on Kickstarter because I'll basically get it when everyone else does anyway. And I have to bring this up because at the time of this review, I still don't have an undamaged deck. I really can't put it off any longer, and I can only review what I have on hand. And so I'm sorry to say that the quality of the product, or at least the quality control of the product, is absolutely horrendous. There's absolutely no excuse for a brand new deck of cards that took 3 years to make, mind you, to arrive this damaged and scratched up. Now, maybe it's a fluke. Maybe the other deck will arrive and we'll have nothing wrong with it. But I don't know that. They haven't sent it yet, so it could be just as damaged and scratched up from the same place, from the same line. It is the same product after all. And so with all of that in mind, the size of the deck making it impractical to use, the damaged and poor state of the cards that they arrived in, the mixed bag of animations, some were really good, some weren't, and even their customer service pushing my replacement off into the public pre-orders instead of the Kickstarter pledge that it was, then everything considered, I have to give this deck a 4 out of 10. And it just squeaks by barely. I was going to rate this deck a 3 out of 10, but there are some good things about this deck. As I said, there are some animations in this deck that will wow you and are very cool. Unfortunately, there are more negatives than positives when it comes to the FABLEMAKER'S animated tarot. Now, if I could go back knowing then what I know now, I wouldn't have backed it. But sometimes it's hard to resist those shiny things. It may be just a gimmick, but it's a hell of a gimmick for a tarot deck. I mean, who wouldn't want their tarot deck animated? But unfortunately, with all of its problems and the issues that I've experienced, and its complete lack of practicality due to its size, I cannot recommend the FABLEMAKER'S animated tarot deck. And that is my review. Now, if you want to learn more about the meanings of the cards themselves, then you'll want to check out my advanced tarot course. Now, on a final note, whenever I do get the replacement deck, if there isn't any damage to the cards, and it just happens to be a fluke that my entire deck was pretty severely damaged, even underneath the protective film, then it's still not really going to affect the score to where I can recommend the deck. It would take it from a 4 to maybe a 6. Because it's still too large and unwieldy to use, it will still require protective sleeves, a large part of the animations will still be ho-hum, and I still wouldn't see myself using it all that much. At least not for divination. Maybe to have up on my altar as correspondences while doing tarot magic, which I go over also in the advanced tarot course, but some use like that where I'm not having to shuffle all these cards. I mean, I'm getting older, my hands already ache from doing this kind of work, sitting at a computer recording and editing, using the mouse and keyboard all the time. The last thing I want to do is shuffle a big old tarot deck that's even too big for my big hands. So that's the caveat. If my replacement is undamaged, it can go up to a 6. And if it is damaged, it'd probably go down to a 2 or a 3. But whatever it is, I probably won't make another video on this, but I will leave an update in the description when I receive it. All right, I want to thank you for joining me. I hope that the review helped you out, and if so, please share and pass it along. You can follow me on social media. The links will be on the screen in a moment, and I will see you next time. Take care.